Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And while I do that, Zubin, you can grab the screen. Welcome, everybody. We have a pretty big group here today. And today we are welcoming Andrea. Now I'm going to say your name right after I had it right. Andrea Echelberger. And we are first going to have a few moments with our sponsor, Zubin Bastani. He's just going to take a few minutes to talk about Reach Well, and then we will turn it over to Andrea shortly after. So, Ruben, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it, and then I will take it back and hand it over to Andrea.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Promise this won't take more than 120 seconds. So thanks for having us as part of today's session. Before we get started and get into the content, I just wanted to plant an idea with you all to chew on during the webinar. Most of you are reaching your learners today through WhatsApp or texting, and that makes a total lot of sense. That's where people already are, but reaching someone isn't the same as being understood. And in adult ed, especially engagement lives or dies on whether a learner or their family actually understands what you sent to them and whether they can respond back in their own language and not just receive a translated blast. And that's the lens I'd invite you to listen through today. As you hear about language access strategies, ask yourself, is this actually two-way? Can someone write back in Spanish or Somali or Vietnamese and have the staff read it in English without extra tools or a bilingual staffer relaying it? That's the gap Reachwell was built to close, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a few minutes at the end of the presentation. But for now, enjoy the presentation. Oh, I think you're muted.
Of course, I'm muted. Have to do it at least once every session. All right. So thank you everybody for joining today. Just a couple things. My name is Ashley Winkle. I forgot to introduce myself. I am the COABE Professional Development Coordinator. Very happy to have everybody here today. I am happy to introduce to you Andrea Echelberger with her session today. Just a few housekeeping things. We have an extremely big group, so I will do my best to keep up in the chat as best as I can. I think Andrea will as well. If you don't get your questions answered right away, we will get to them as soon as we can. There is a QA feature that you can use as well, which feel free to use that or the chat. You will get a certificate of completion at the end. That is within 24 hours. And then all of your any resources will be shared with you on the website within 48 hours. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Andrea for the teaching soft skills to literacy level in beginning ELLs. There you go,
Great.
Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you so much, Zubin, for that introduction. And I'm sure people are excited to hear more about ReachWell. So, welcome everybody. Hi from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Today we're going to be talking about teaching soft skills to literacy level and beginning English language learners. And I've been enjoying watching the chat and seeing everybody's names and locations come in. That's just fantastic. So, greetings to everyone from not just all around the United States, but around the world. I have been working in the field of adult education for over 20 years now as a teacher and then as a teacher trainer, and then realized that I wanted to do both. So now I teach and I train. So, what is going to be happening is I am going to be giving you some information on these soft skills and how we can use them with literacy and beginning level English language learners, but also know that all of these soft skills are going to be able to be adapted for much, much higher levels as well. You can easily adapt up. And I'm going to be giving you a lot of concrete activity ideas because I am a teacher and I know when I go to a session, the most important thing for me is to walk out and have something that I can use in my class the next day. So that is my hope for you is that you get something that you can use um, in your class next week on Monday morning or the next time you start teaching or something you can pass on to your teachers to be able to use. So I'm going to get us started off with a very technical question. And I would like everybody to use the chat and look at this very highly scientific and technical CAT scale. And just put a number in the chat that represents which CAT represents how you feel about teaching soft skills at these levels. And let's see what comes in. All right, I'm seeing a lot of twos, five, 7, 4, 8, 6, some ones. Oh, I saw a 3. Some nines. People talking about feeling it at all levels. Okay, it looks like we have all of the numbers covered. So it looks like we have a very wide range of opinions and feelings about teaching soft skills. And then maybe not just at beginning levels, but at all of the different levels. So now that we have sort of established a baseline of what we're feeling, I would love it if people at the end would think if you have moved on to a different cat. Maybe you started at 8, or you started at 7, or you started at 6, and by the end you feel more like 2, and like you have some hope and some enthusiasm. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to do a very, very brief overview of soft skills, and then we're going to talk about 3 specific soft skills areas: critical thinking, self-management and learning strategies, and effective communication. And I have the chat open, and so that is what I'm going to be watching, and Ashley is also going to be helping me out. So if a question comes up and I can just address it and roll it in, I will do my best to do that. I'll also be pausing after sections 2, 3, and 4 for specific questions and for people to do some reflection. And then we will make sure that we will see if we have some time for questions at the end. So, what are soft skills? They're essentially people skills that allow us to interact with others effectively in the workplace, and they translate across a wide variety of jobs and industries. So, soft skills are different than hard skills in that, for example, I'm an adult English language teacher. A hard skill that I have is curriculum writing. I know how to write and design a curriculum. That is something that I use a skill that I use at my job that is specific to my job. However, a soft skill I have is I've been working in the field of adult education for a long time, which means I've become very adept at being able to communicate with people with different English language levels and from different language backgrounds. And so that would be a soft skill that I have, is that communication skill, that ability to talk with people where I have limited knowledge of their language and they are working on their English, but I know how to do it and I know how to get my message across and how to understand people. So that would be an example of a soft skill that I have. And that soft skill is translatable across kind of any job that I go to. I'm going to be able to use that communication skill. Um, Also wonderful for traveling. I remember when I went to Cambodia and my partner was saying, I don't speak Khmer. And I'm like, well, I speak beginning level every language. And so I did not speak the Khmer, but I was the one who was able to get us through because I had those communication skills. So there's a resource I want people to be aware of that comes out of Minnesota. It's called the Transitions Integration Framework. And up in Minnesota, we really love our acronyms, so we call it the TIF. And the TIF has um, this these 6 different areas: critical thinking, developing a future pathway, effective communication, learning strategies, navigating systems, and self-management. And so these are all kind of these big soft skill areas that have been identified And then when you go into the transition integrations framework, and if people want to pull up your phone and take a look at this right now, you can. Otherwise, you'll be getting a copy of the slides, and this QR code is in there. You can pull it up at any time. You'll be able to see how it has been broken down into concrete different skills, and then even further broken down into sub skills that make these really big, how do I teach like effective communication that's so broad into much more tangible and manageable goals that will work really well in your teaching. So as we go through, I'm going to be showing some of those skills. Like I said, I'm going to be showing you a lot of different activities. Um, and those, I'll show you how those activities tie into the transitions integration framework, tie into the TIF and the specific skills and sub skills that they have in there. I see some people are raising their hands, so I'm just going to let you know because of the time. If you have questions, if you want to pop those in the chat, and if I'm able, I'll address them as I go. And if not, we should have some time at the end. All right, let's jump into our first skill, soft skill, which is critical thinking. And here is sort of the professional definition from the Transitions Integration Framework, which is that critical thinking requires disciplined thinking that is open-minded, rational, and informed by evidence in order to arrive at decisions or conclusions that go beyond factual recall. And critical thinking skills are increasingly essential for adult education learners to succeed in the workplace, higher education, and navigating the complexities of 21st century life. And a couple of things that I would really like to point out to us as we're thinking about critical thinking and thinking about teaching it is that critical thinking is a mindset. It is not a language level, which means that we can teach it at any level because it's something that people already know how to do. English language learners are critical thinkers. Think of all of the incredibly challenging thinking that they're doing, navigating systems, making complex decisions, solving problems every day, often in a new language. So, what this means is that we as teachers, we're not teaching people how to think. We are working with adults, not children, um, but how to do it in English. So, how to transfer those critical thinking skills that people already have into a new language. So, there are three really big things that I want to talk about before we get into those concrete actions. And these are particularly true for critical thinking, um, but but they're going to be helpful for all levels, and I really believe any area that you teach. So the first one is to build rapport. Um, and we really want to make sure that we're providing an environment where students feel supported and they feel willing to take risks because expressing your thoughts in a new language is a really vulnerable experience and can really make people feel a lot of anxiety, particularly people who are at the beginning of their English language journey and they're struggling to communicate effectively in English. So we really want to make sure that we are minimizing that affective filter because we know that people who feel nervous or anxious are going to be less open to learning and they're going to be less willing to take risks involved in participating in class and class activities um, because they're afraid that people are going to see that they're not as good as English as they want to be. So when we're doing critical thinking, we're asking students to share their ideas, to share their opinions, not just sharing answers off a worksheet. And that can be challenging. So we really need to make sure that people feel safe. And I thought this picture was perfect for it. This is a picture of two of my learners where had asked permission to take some pictures to use in trainings, and they were doing an activity. Like, can I take your picture? And they immediately shifted around so they were sitting next to each other instead of across the table from each other to pose for the picture. And I thought, we're doing a good job building rapport here. My learners in the class feel very comfortable with each other. The next thing we want to be making sure we're doing is applying context. Um, Information that people are getting um, doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it's always received and interpreted in a specific situational and cultural environment. And English language learners come from really diverse cultural and language backgrounds, which means they don't necessarily share the same contextual background as their class mates and teacher. So we really need to make sure that we are providing the context for the information that we are asking students to do critical thinking about. And I have this picture because early on in my teaching career, this is still stuck with me for 20 years, reading an article where an adult language learner was really frustrated because he was reading a story about homes, and it was written about a family who had turned a bus into a home. And he could not understand it because in his context, he was like, people don't live in buses. This doesn't make sense. And so it was really important. It's really important to make sure that people have that broader context and the context of what we are asking them to think about. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we are asking questions and that we are asking questions that aren't just those lower order thinking, but also the higher order thinking skills, like analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So making sure that we are asking questions of learners of all levels that address both levels of the thinking process. All right, so enough of background information. Let's get into the concrete suggestions. So these are things that you can just take and use in your class every day. So first suggestion for critical thinking activity is would you rather questions. So here's an example of one that I've used in my class. Would you rather work with elderly people or children? And then we add the word why on the ends. Would you rather work with elderly people or children? Why? So when we add that why, now we are asking people to explain their thought process. So now we are asking them to do some critical thinking. So if people want, you can pop in the chat. Would you rather work with elderly people or children? And why? So I'll just let people reflect on that for a moment. Um, and I work with beginning level EL English language learners, and I will tell you why is the magic word. Because as soon as you add that word why, all of a sudden you're automatically asking people to do critical thinking. And it's a complete sentence, which means that people of all levels are able to effectively use it as a great follow-up question. All right, and I'm watching the answers roll in and I'm seeing sort of all across the board, and then I'm seeing some both of what people would prefer. And people putting in some different examples, zombie attack or alien invasion. Um, and then why? Now we're doing really interesting critical thinking. So perfect example of how you can take this simple activity and you can do it with any context that you're teaching. And it's just great if you can have students, have these concrete pictures, have it tied to the context, but a great warm-up question, great way to get students doing that in-depth thinking. Okay. Another example is photo sorts, because when we do photo sorts, we're doing organizing and categorizing. So here is an example of an activity that I've used in my class where we are doing photo sorts. And I have something put up, and then students are working together in partners or small groups. And I have them sorting things in a variety of ways. And I would put them up one at a time if we were doing this as a class activity. But sort these foods by count and non-count nouns. That was a grammar point that we worked on. We worked on last year, and I am just have to brag a little bit. My learners nailed it. They did so good with count and non-count nouns. Like or dislike, and then healthy or unhealthy. And then that critical thinking, making that language, that thinking visible through language, is we have the sentence, I put these foods together because, and now learners are explaining their thought process. But again, we can do this with sort of any topic that we're working with learners. It doesn't just have to be foods. Um, and sometimes it can be really interesting to see thought processes where I will give learners something to sort. Okay, I'll say sort these into two groups. And then the learners have to work together to figure out what are the groups going to be, and then explain, I put these clothes together because, um, and have to explain. And I see a question, how can we do a sorting activity online? I would recommend WordWall if people, and I'm just going to type that in. WordWall um, has sorting activities. Other people might have good things where you could even send people a link, and then they could go and sort it by themselves and then come back and explain. Or I teach high flex, which means I teach in person and online at the same time. So I'll often put something up, and then I'll ask my online students. My in-person students might be moving things around in person, but you can also just put people in small groups and have them practice writing things down and then coming back. Great. And I see people putting, thank you, Ashley, for getting the actual link to that. Yep. Oh, and I see numbers can be used to sort, and having them draw a table in their notebook. Thank you for that recommendation. And so here's an example of what I was talking about earlier with the TIFF. When we do these types of activities, what we're hitting is the skill one. Organize, analyze, and illustrate relationships. And so learners are doing things like categorizing items or ideas and articulating rationale. Supporting positions when they're explaining the would you rather, using prior knowledge and supporting evidence. Yeah. And when we use, I see a great point in the chat. Sometimes we're going to start with those lower order close-ended questions that help us scaffold to getting learners to be able to do the more critical critical thinking skills. All right, so let's look at what's your evidence. So I'm going to show you a picture, um, and I would like you to tell me in the picture what is the event? What is the event in the picture? All right, so I'm seeing lots of birthday, a 16th birthday. What's your evidence? Candles, 16 candles, the cake. Mm-hmm. Yes. Great. So simple things like this, where we're showing a picture, and we can ask lots of questions. It can be any question. Is it day or night? Where are they? How do they feel? Or how do you think they will feel? And then learners aren't just answering that simple question, like, what is the event? It's a birthday party. How do you know? And we can use the complicated, complex language of what's your evidence? Well, there's a cake. There are candles on the cake. There is 16. And so that would represent that somebody is having a 16th birthday party. So we can get learners to be practicing sharing the evidence from a picture. So when we're doing this, learners are supporting positions using prior knowledge and supporting evidence. And they're also synthesizing information, ideas, and components in a meaningful, structured way. Well, here's my evidence for why it's a birthday. Here's my evidence for why it's nighttime. Here's my evidence for why it's a kitchen. Right. Problem scenario pictures. And here's a great example from the repository from Atlas, where I'll show you where to find these types of activities at the end, where learners are getting the chance to do critical thinking as they match problems with a solution and then explain why they chose that. So, if my car is broken down, I will take the bus because it's only a little money, um, or because it's easy. If I miss the bus, I will call a friend because it's free and it's fast. So we're giving them the options to choose how they would solve a problem and then the language to talk about it. Um, and here's one I used in class when we were doing a unit on housing, and learners and partners and groups talked about the problem is, so they identified the problem, and then they talked about how they would fix it. So I would love it if people would pop into the chat. How would you fix this problem? We have put a frame around it. Oh, magic erasers. I have introduced learners in the past to the magic of magic erasers. Those things are actually magic. Um, so we can show pictures of something happening in a household or of an issue happening, asking learners to identify what the problem is, and then asking them what steps they would take to fix it. And so when we do this, we're looking at skill 2, where people are articulating the component parts of a problem, and they are identifying and evaluating potential solutions and possible consequences to these solutions. They can also identify, prioritize, and apply steps to solve problems. So let's look at another one where we have fact versus opinion. And I think everybody can agree that this is a really important critical thinking skill for people to be having, um, a chance to be able to figure out what is a fact versus what is opinion with so much stuff on social media right now. And so we can do this in very, very simple ways. Like, let's do a sorting. What statements are facts? What statements are opinions? And why? How do you know? So here's an example. No matter where you live, you're going to have strong opinions about the weather. And so here we have facts. January is very cold. I'm in Minnesota. So in Minnesota, it is a fact. January is very cold. July is very hot. Fall starts in September and it rains a lot in April. Then opinion, May is the best month. I don't like February. August is too hot. winter has too much snow. So we can have a conversation with the learners about how do you know which is which. And when learners do activities like this, they are going to be working on skill number 3, where they're identifying and evaluating options and consequences. And they're also evaluating the quality and validity of information as well. All right, for the last part of this section, I want to show you a pre-TIFF, so pre-critical thinking skills, and post-critical thinking skills lesson. And if people want, and you have another device, I have a QR code up there so you could look at them together. Otherwise, I'll just show them to you on the computer screen. But here we are going to look at a pre-TIFF lesson. And so the pre-TIFF lesson is sort of the lesson taught as is. And then we're going to look at it post-TIFF to see what happens when the teacher looks at it through that lens of how can I apply critical thinking skills in this class. So I'll give you a moment, look at the pre-TIFF lesson, and just you can read it really quickly, or if you are looking at it on a device, you can flip through and look at the pre and the post on your phone. So we've got our warm up where a student goes to the board and writes today's name, date, and yesterday, and the class chorally repeats. They review place vocabulary, they go through worksheets, they use classroom realia where teacher places 2 objects next to each other and the students say next to, across from, between. Then students read questions about the map, they circle appropriate answers. They work in pairs and use a map to complete a short close dialogue. You can see that example up there. And then they ask where is questions to each other. All right, so that's our pre-TIFF lesson. Let's take a look at our post-TIFF lesson. So here's what we've got. And you can see it's the same lesson, but there's been some changes made to it. So I'm going to give you a moment to just read through it yourselves. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about it. And TIFF is Transitions Integration Framework. So it's essentially soft skills. Okay. And I'm going to, here's that QR code, and then I'll go back to the post-TIFF. Okay. All right, so there's that post-TIFF lesson. All right, and then I have some questions for you, and I'm just going to say the questions out loud, and people can go ahead and start typing answers into the chat. But what do you notice about the difference between the pre and post-TIFF lessons? What is standing out to you about what makes them different? And then, of course, what interests you and what do you want to learn more about? So I'm seeing students are more engaged, work in groups, more thinking involved, more actively engaged, more analytical, more accountability in the second one. There's more problem solving, more creative. Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of things, more thinking, more engagement. There's more necessary communication, more student directed versus teacher directed. Yes, absolutely. Teachers support students' thought instead of leading everything. Great. Yeah. So there is a lot more thinking. There's a lot more group work. There's a lot more communication happening. Yeah, it's much more student centered and a lot more, yeah, people thinking things through. All right. So I'd love, we're about to move on to the next one, but before we move on to the next section, I just want people to take a quick pause and reflect. We went through different activities. What critical thinking activities would you like to try? Is there anything that jumped out to you that you're thinking, I want to see how that works in my class? Okay, I'm thinking sorts. Would you rather problem solving, all of them, fact versus opinion? Yeah, great. I love that some people are putting word wall in there too. This is why I like doing sessions is because as we're going through them, I'm also getting ideas from the people in in the session and from the questions that come up. All right. So you can keep adding things in the chat. We're going to move on to self-management and learning strategies. So this is the second area that we're going to be looking at of soft skills. And this refers to steps, strategies, and skills that people can use towards the achievement of goals. So organizing study materials, setting goals, and monitoring progress. And teaching self-management prepares learners to succeed in environments where there is little guidance, structure, and monitoring. So if you think about a lot of jobs, people are expected to try to solve the problem themselves first before they come to the manager. So let's look at some concrete suggestions that we have. One suggestion is a goal ladder. So a goal ladder is where as students are moving throughout a unit or working towards something that they want to be able to achieve in English, they are keeping track of their progress and seeing how that moves them to our goal. So here's an example of one that I used in my class where health goals ladder, kind of our ultimate goal was to be able to talk to a doctor. That's what we wanted to be able to do. So doing role plays at the end in that last week of our session where people were talking to the doctor. They were talking about pain in their body. They were talking about health problems, and then they needed to be able to talk about how when it started and how severe it was. And then in that ultimate, we also wanted to be able to ask some follow-up questions and have that back and forth communication with the doctor. So this is what that goal ladder looks like as we're going through, week one, students are having the option towards the end of the week. We go through and they're quizzing each other, they're quizzing themselves. Which ones do they know? Which ones do they need to take home and practice? Um, Same with week two. Which ones do they know? Which ones do they need to take home and practice? Week three, which ones are they really familiar with that they've been using in class, and which ones do they want to spend a little more time on the weekend going over? And then that last one, week four, our goal is to talk to a doctor. People can check off, yes, I can talk to a doctor. And I had a student come back a few weeks later and she was like, I talked to the doctor. I didn't use an interpreter. I told the doctor my problem, and she was so proud of herself. And so sometimes we get that really concrete, somebody actually goes out and does it. Um, but we also want to make sure that people are having the opportunity to be tracking their goals and tracking their progress in class, because that's what keeps people motivated. And that's a really important soft skill to be able to do. And this addresses under that self-management, setting realistic goals and working independently towards them. So identifying steps, monitoring progress, they're monitoring their progress as they go through each week, and persevering and sticking with a task until completion. Another really simple activity that we can do is calendar math with a purpose. So I think most people who work with beginning level English language learners, what is the date today? What was the date yesterday? What will be the date tomorrow? We always are asking those questions. But what if we throw in some questions like, how many days until the reading test? So, how many more days do we have to practice? How many more days until the listening test? How many more weeks in April? So that learners can get the practice of, having a calendar and being able to identify, I have 5 days until this happens. So I have 5 more days to practice, or I have 5 more days to prepare. And that is working on the skill, utilizing tools for time management, and can also be setting deadlines. We can use questions like that to have students set deadlines. And then another skill that goes along with this is practicing circumlocution. So circumlocution, that ability to talk around a word when there is something that you don't know how to say. And so, oh, I 1 second. My, I just need to make a quick change to this. There, now you can see what you were supposed to be able to see before it was being hidden. But the idea of giving learners the opportunity to practice circumlocution by giving phrases and then an activity for them to help their partner guess the item. So they have the cell phone and they can't say it's a cell phone, um, but they have to say things that will get the person to guess the item. So people need this to talk to their families. Um, oh, this is usually in my hand. So, or for a dishwasher, people need this to wash dishes. This thing helps people to keep their kitchen clean. So, think about any lesson you're teaching where you have vocabulary. You could just have people pulling up the pictures and then they have to describe the thing, and we can give them those set phrases that they are able to use. And the last time I was doing this, somebody said, "Oh, it's like taboo." And I was thinking, that might be a great use of you know, using AI to have AI make taboo cards where you put in your vocabulary and then it generates words that the learners can't say and they have to do more of that talking around it. So when students are doing activities like this, um, they are compensating for unknown language using paraphrase or circumlocution. They can also be using context and what you know to figure it out to guess the meaning of language. And then we have the learning log routine. And this is something I do in my EL 1-2 class, where at the end of class every day, for the last 2 or 3 minutes, I have students turn to each other. And you can do this verbally, or you can have it be part of a writing activity, where people talk about my favorite part of class today was, one thing I remember was, and tomorrow I want to practice. So we can do this talking in partners, or you can have learners talk and then write things down. And when we do this, people are identifying preference for learning styles and modalities, and are also articulating strengths and areas for growth as a learner. All right, so I'm going to pause. This is the end of the second section, and ask people, what self-management activities would you like to try? Was there anything from this that popped into this section that you think, I want to take that and try that in my class? All right, I'm seeing lots of different things, including some alls, but circumlocution. That, I mean, that's such an important skill to practice. And as somebody who has taught English for a very long time, if I play the game Taboo or any of those games where you can't say the word and you have to describe it, I am very good at it because I've had lots and lots and lots of practice as a language learner and as a teacher, being able to talk around things. Okay, so let's move on to our third part, which is effective communication. And people can go ahead, keep popping things in the chat. But knowing that effective communication is a two-way process between individuals of diverse backgrounds and experience, in which information is conveyed and received in ways that are mutually understood as intended. So this can include speaking, writing, and all forms of nonverbal communication. And when we practice effective communication, the skills in this category helps learners give and receive information in a purposeful, appropriate, and collaborative manner. So, and I see some questions about the goal ladder. That is something that I created myself, where I used a use of AI where I put in, here are the different activities or the different language that we're going to be using throughout the unit. Please put together a goal ladder with check boxes so students can check them off as they go. All right, so let's look at some concrete suggestions. One that I have been doing in my class for years now is we start every class with greeting everybody in their home language. So we, good morning, and then we say it in all of the other languages so that everybody gets to hear good morning in their home language. And then the thing that that expands beyond is before class starts or in the hallways, I will hear people saying hello to each other in each other's home language. And that is a skill that if people take that into the workplace, they are going to be able to build rapport really quickly with coworkers. And so nice to just hear your language, even if it's just a word, and have everybody say hi to you. And some more examples of simple ways to do the have learners do effective communication in the classroom. Like two of my learners. I do a lot of partner work where one student has cards that have different numbers, and then she is dictating the numbers to her partner, who is writing them down. And then they have this natural negotiation going back and forth because she can't show him the card. And so they have to talk back and forth and figure out if he has the right number. And we do the same thing. This is a learner doing a similar activity. She is one of my in-person students, and she is up at the front of the class working with my online students, and she is reading sight words to them. So she says the sight words, um, and then they work on spelling, and then she puts it down, and they can check. And then we do an activity where we do a mingle grid, where learners walk around and they ask each other questions that relate to the topic. And we do this every other week. Um, so, name, this was how you feel today. Do you like winter in Minnesota? How do you get to school? And I put some follow-up questions that they could ask if they needed, or if they had time, or if they wanted to do a little bit more questioning with why, or why not, and when. And then we have that, can you repeat that, please? How do you spell that? And here is an example of some students doing this activity. And when I do it, we do it with the class above us. I teach EL 1, 2, and then my colleague teaches EL 3. And sometimes getting students to move up to the next level can be very challenging because people get, are really attached. They form deep relationships with the people in their classroom. They feel very comfortable with the teacher. It can be hard to move up to the next class. So my colleague and I started doing these biweekly mingles where level 3 learners have blue papers and my learners have pink papers. Um, and they all have the same questions and they mingle, they talk to each other, they get to know each other's names. And it's been a lot easier to get people to move up because now they have met everybody in the next class when we ask them to move to the next level. So here are some different skills that people are working on. They're able to seek and offer clarification. They're able to repair communication breakdowns respectfully and effectively. And they are acknowledging and affirming others when we do these activities. So let's look at some body language and cultural communications. Here's one of the ones that you'll be able to find in the resource repository that I show you at the end, where it's doing a reading about greetings with who we shake hands with in the United States versus who we hug. And so it's easy to create or recreate activities around this where you can talk about different types of body language. Who do you make eye contact with um, versus who do you not make eye contact with? How close do you stand to people depending on in your culture? And then also we can then talk about expectations in a new culture. And this can also work great with photos, with what do you think the relationship is to these people in the picture? Why do you think that? Um, does this look like something you would do in your culture? What's the same? What's different? Same here. So showing different pictures can be a great way to get students talking about their own cultures and then also what they notice about I'm going to say American culture because that's where I'm based or Minnesota culture. And so what are those expectations and the body language differences? And when people do this, they are practicing that subskill, recognizing meaning of gestures and body language in a particular context and using it appropriately. And then we have practice messages. And so I'm showing an example of WhatsApp, but I know at the end we'll be able to hear if how you can use a different app to do this. But we do examples of using register where I have students actually get on WhatsApp on our WhatsApp group and they send messages. So send a message to your manager telling her you're sick. Send a message to your teacher. Send a message to your friend. And we'll practice doing the different ones. And I'll give language that you can use. So I always give sentence frames for my beginning learners. And then we'll compare the difference. And send a message to your friend, you're probably not going to be using the throwing up emojis, the barf emojis in the message to your friend that you use in the message to your friend when you send the message to your manager. So that's a really concrete way for us to compare. And when people do this, they are employing protocols like register and tone appropriate to audience and purpose when they are using technology. So I would love to know what effective communication activities would people like to try? Yep. And we do this together. It's students should be sending messages in class. We do this in class as an in-class activity so people can get feedback and can see that in real time. And something as people are putting this in, when we're talking about that body language and the register that we use, I had a very real life moment where I was talking to a learner from West Africa, and she and I were standing very close and we were talking. And then I turned to my volunteer, who is an older woman from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I instinctively took a step back to give more space between her and I as I was talking to her. And it was something I didn't even think about, but I noticed when I did that. Um, And the learner and I and the my volunteer, we were laughing about how, yeah, you change the body language, and we instinctively change our body language to make other people comfortable. And then we had a great conversation about it in class the next day about proximity. How close do you stand when you are talking to somebody? Proxemics. All right. So I am going to wrap us up and I'm going to hand it back over to Zubin to talk about Reach Well. But we talked about a lot in this session. We talked about effective communication activities. We talked about critical thinking. We talked about self-management. Um, and if you have one specific activity that you really are intrigued in trying, or just sort of one big idea takeaway that you have from this session, it would be great if people would want to pop that pop that in the chat, and so we can all see that. All right. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and Zubin, hand it over to you.
Great. That was awesome, Andrea. Exactly what I expected to hear from you. Just some really innovative ideas. Go ahead and shut this here. Bring that down. Sorry about that. Da, da, da. Okay. So just to wrap up, yeah, I just wanted to kind of come back to that question that I'd left you all with at the beginning of the presentation. Is your current communication tool actually two-way multilingual? For most of you guys, for most of all of us using WhatsApp or texting today, the honest answer is really not really. Reachwell was built specifically for this problem. You can send one message from one place and it's automatically translated into 135 languages. And it goes out and gets delivered however your community actually communicates, whether that's texting, emailing, app, even a phone call that can be translated, and even updating websites and social media. So this does not require an app on their end. And when a learner or a parent replies, they can always write in their message in their own language, and your staff and you all can read it in English. So it's really full two-way, real-time, no manual translation relay. And we all were already work with a lot of adult ed and workforce development programs across the country, including K-12 programs as well. And they're doing exactly this kind of multilingual family and learner engagement. And if today's session got you thinking about where your current tools might fall short, I'd love to show you Reachwell in action. You can grab the QR code on the screen right there, or find me after the session, and happy to do a quick 15-minute walkthrough of your program specifically. So thank you so much for allowing Reachwell to be a part of today's presentation and this learning opportunity. And we've built this platform really based on feedback from teams and organizations, nonprofits, schools, just like yourselves. So what you'll see in Reachwell is really exactly what your adult learning programs have been asking for. So thanks. Ashley, I'll pass
Um,
it back to you.
Somebody is asking for the QR code at the beginning.
I don't know if there was a QR code at the beginning.
I don't know if that was yours or if that was Andrea's. I'm not sure. Just to close it up, I'm not sure either, but a lot of you asked repeatedly about resources and seeing and if this video was going to be available later. The answer is yes. It was amazing. Andrea did an amazing job. Thank you so much. Lots of great ideas. Absolutely amazing. So these will be available. You will get them on email with it usually the next day with your certificate. See, I beat you to it. You will get your certificate via email. Should be within 24 hours, and then the actual session itself will be available under CoWave webinars. If you just Google it, that's usually the quickest way to find it. CoWave webinars will be available. I saw somebody missed it, so you can still watch it. Andrea, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for being here and joining us, and it was a pleasure meeting you and learning about your amazing product, Zubin. And thank you, everybody. Always good to see you. And we'll see you next time. I think we have another one coming up in March, in August. Where is my brain? Oh my gosh. Okay.
We were
I'm like
talking
just,
about winter in Minnesota a
I
lot. So
know. I'm like reading and talking. I have no idea where March came from. How about not March? How about August? Rushing through this. Yeah, just skipping winter completely. All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope everybody has a great day.
thank you.
Lots of great comments, Andrea.
Yeah, I'm enjoying reading them. Fun. All right. And I'm sure
Thank
everybody will get the
you.
slides. And so then all those QR codes will be in the slides when
Awesome.
mm.
Thanks. Thank you both. Have a great day.
You too. Nice to meet you.
You
Thank
too,
you.
officially. Bye.
Bye.